Everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning in your Senate chamber. Today is our seventh day, fourth regular Senate session, Wednesday, December 18, 2024. It's exactly 10:55 in the morning. We apologize for the delay. Before we proceed with our business this morning, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Babalta,
Presente.
Senator Cruz. Madam President,
Here.
Senator Hufschneider,
Yay.
Senator King Neighbors,
Here.
Senator Bajakian,
Present.
Senator Manglonia Donald,
Present.
Senator Manglonia Paul, Senator Mindiola,
Here.
Senator Manglonia Paul,
Aye.
Madam President, all 9 members are present.
Thank you, Clerk. With all 9 members present, we have established the necessary quorum to conduct our business this morning. And before we proceed, for the viewing public, we are also live on cable TV channel 23 and live on the CNMI Legislature's YouTube channel, which will be shared on the CNMI Legislature's Facebook page. And assisting us this morning is our Senate Legal Counsel, Orsay Bermudez, Senate Clerk Dolores Bermudez, our Senate Journal Clerk Chanel Borja, Senate Legislative Assistant Jolene Duenas-Tagabel, our IT Manager Jonathan Diaz, and Sergeant at Arms Benjamin Terlahi. Thank you for helping us this morning. Moving on to item B of our agenda under public comments. We are now open for public comments on the agenda items. Anybody would like to make a comment? Okay, there's nobody here to make a comment. We are officially closing that section of the agenda. Moving on to item C, reading and approval of the journal. I now recognize the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, under item C, we have 2 journals. Senate Journal number 23-41, first day, 5th special session, dated October 30, 2024. And if I may, Senate President, Senate Journal number 23-42, 6th day, 4th regular session, dated November 19, 2024, an agenda for adoption and approval, and I move for its adoption.
Thank you, floor leader, and has been seconded. There is a motion to adopt Senate Journals number 23-41 and 2342. All those in favor say aye. Nay. Senate Journals
Aye.
23-41 and 23-42 is hereby adopted. And I'd like to recognize the floor leader also to make a motion to suspend pertinent rules to accept new communications that came in this morning. Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I would like to offer a motion to suspend pertinent rules to amend today's agenda to include several communications. So moved.
There's a motion to suspend pertinent some rules of the Senate rules to accept new communications that came in this morning. All those in favor say aye. Nays. Motion carries. Moving on to item D, messages from the governor. Clerk.
Madam President, we have 11 on our agenda, 360 to 365.
Any comments from the members? None. Moving on to item E, communications from the Judiciary Clerk.
We have 1, Madam President, 2314.
At this moment, I'd like to recognize the floor leader to make the proper motion
Thank you,
on
Madam.
item E1.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I would like to offer a motion to reject the proposed amendments to the rules of attorney discipline and procedures. So moved.
There's a motion to reject item number, Judiciary Communication number 23-14, proposed amendments to the rules of attorney discipline and procedure, and has been seconded. Discussions from the members. Recognize Senator Selena Babauta.
Citizens Moses, Madam President. If it's if there are no objections, can we at least get an explanation of why? Is there anything in the rules that would validate a rejection of it?
Council.
The only communication that was received prior to this session, earlier was a recommendation from one of the attorneys, Attorney Dodds. And then this morning, I think there's at least 2 or 3 letters that were received. Again, making recommendations
Okay,
to changes of the proposals.
okay.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Babauta. Any further discussions from the members? Recognize Senator Donald Manglonia.
Thank you, Madam President. Prior to today's session, I think this was something that I probably would have supported at the recommendation by the CNMI bar, but since receiving these additional letters of concerns from several attorneys, we have Attorney Taidinko along with 12 others joining in on that letter, Attorney Ogden, Satterberg, and Berman. I think these rules are something that should be further looked at and take into considerations the proposals that were brought forth by these attorneys. And so at this time, I would support the rejection of the proposed rules. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Donald Manglonia. Any further comments from the members? Senators online, do you have any comments? Okay, clerk, please call the roll to reject.
Senator Babauta,
Yes.
Senator Cruz,
This is for the approval.
I reject it.
Yes for rejection.
Senator Hofschneider,
Just for clarification, one more time, the floor leader made a motion for rejection of the item before us. So a vote on yes, that means we're disapproving it.
Yes.
Okay, that's correct. So my vote is yes.
Senator King Neighbors,
Yes.
Senator Manglonia,
Yes.
Senator Manglonia Donald,
Yes.
Senator Manglonia Paul, Senator Mindiola,
Yes.
Senator Manglonia Paul. Madam President,
Yes.
Madam President, 8 members voting yes.
With 8 members voting yes to reject, Judiciary Communication Number 23-14, proposed amendments to the Rules of Attorney Discipline and Procedure is hereby rejected by the Senate body. Moving on to item F, communications from the heads of executive department. Clerk?
Madam President, we have 8 on our agenda, 93-104 to.
Any comments from the
I'm sorry,
members?
105.
Members, any comments? Moving on to item G, communications from the House. Clerk?
We have 12 on our agenda, 23-167 to 178.
Any comments from the members? None. Moving on to item H, communications from the Senate. Clerk?
We have 7 on our agenda, 23-543 to 550, Madam President.
Comments from the members? None. Moving on to item I, communications from the Washington delegate, there is none. Unfinished business. Item J, there is none. Item K, pre-filed bills, initiatives, local bills, and resolutions. I now recognize the author of the legislations. Recognize Senator Selena Arbabauta.
Thank you, Madam President. I apologize for the delay. Colleagues, I pre-filed this Senate Resolution 2308 to honor the President of Taiwan as the 16th President of the Republic of China, Taiwan, on November 26, 2024, and I ask that you support it. I yield at this time.
Thank you, Senator Babauta. I now recognize for item 2, Senator Donald Manglonia.
Thank you, Madam President. Introducing Senate Commemorative Resolution 2309, to commemorate the distinguished life of the late Efren Maloney Athletic and to recognize his honorable service to the people of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And I welcome the committee of the whole to join in on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Maloney. Item 1 to item L, introduction of bills, initiatives, local bills, and resolutions. I'd like to recognize Senator Carl Neighbors. Short recess. We are back from our short recess. We're moving on to our item M, report of standing committee. There is none. Item N, reports of special conference committee. There is none. Moving on to item O under resolution calendar, and I'll recognize the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Under item O, we have two resolutions calendar for action. Senate Commemorative Resolution number 2308 and 2309. Senate Commemorative Resolution number 2308. I move for its adoption.
There's a motion to adopt Senate commemorative resolution number 2308 and has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Nays? Senate commemorative resolution number 2308 is hereby adopted. Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Next, we have Senate Commemorative Resolution number 2309, and I move for its adoption.
There's a motion to adopt Senate commemorative resolution number 2309. It has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Nays? Senate commemorative resolution number 2309 is hereby adopted. Moving on to item P under review calendar, there is none. Item Q, petitions, memorials, and miscellaneous communications. Clerk.
Madam President, we have 13 on our agenda now with the additional communication 2374 to 286.
Any comments from the members? Recognize Senator Jude Hoff-Schneider.
Madam President, I don't have any pointed comment to offer, but I respectfully ask that we consider including an email by our fiscal analyst dated December 12, 2024, email to all the members of the Senate with an analysis of the fiscal impact with relates to the FY 2025 proposed restoration of 80 hours. I believe some of the members of the Senate have mentioned briefly about this during the last session, and I'm trying to find it in this order of business if it's present, but since it's not, without any objection from the members, I respectfully ask that we amend the agenda to include this as a miscellaneous so that we can further discuss the analysis and other questions that some members may have with regards to the Planning and Budgeting Act, with regards to FY 2025. Madam President, I know that I should have made this request earlier, but I respectfully ask that we include it.
Thank you, Senator Hoff-Schneider. Short recess, please. Thank you, Senators. We are now back from our short recess, and I'd like to recognize the floor leader. We are still on item Q on the miscellaneous communications for the inclusion of the last communication this morning offered by Senator Jude Schneider, miscellaneous communication 23-289. Floor leader, please make the proper motion to suspend certain rules for the acceptance of this new communication.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, if I may, I would like to offer a motion to suspend pertinent rules to add miscellaneous communication number 23-289 on today's agenda. So moved.
Thank you, floor leader. There is a motion to accept miscellaneous communication 23-289 and it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Nays?
Aye.
Miscellaneous communication 23-289 is hereby accepted as part of today's Senate session agenda. And if there's no objection, members, we shall dissolve into a committee as a whole to discuss this particular miscellaneous communication. Any objections? Okay. At this time, we will invite our fiscal analyst, Mr. Dave Demapan. Before you speak, I will first recognize our legal counsel to talk about the statute with respect to this particular miscellaneous item that we will be addressing this morning. Counsel?
Yeah, under Title I, Section 7604, it provides for the changes in revenue estimates. And under B, says in the case of $200 or 3% or more increase in revenues, the governor shall transmit within 15 days a special budget message to the legislature proposing for provide additional budget authority for the fiscal year. And the answer to Senator Bavalta's question, when, says 15 days after they identified the revenue increase.
Thank you, counsel. So that's 13 days after the administration identifies the increase in funding of $200,000 or 3% or more increase in revenues, correct?
15 days.
15 days. And so, for example, if it happened yesterday as an example, if the resources were identified yesterday, it'll be, the clock will start ticking beginning today of 15 days forward. And we should assume that based on that statute clarification that there's no public expenditure happening outside of the approved budget of Public Law 23-26, which was passed on September 18, 2024, and signed into law on September 30. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, counsel. I now recognize the fiscal analyst of the Senate, Mr. Dave Demapan, to provide us more details in his analyses dated December 12th, I believe, if not mistaken, on the email. Before you do that, Dave, let me recognize Senator Jude Schneider.
Thank you, Madam President, and I appreciate the members to consideration to include this. First and foremost, I want to go on record to say that we support the restoration of 80 hours to the much deserving employees. However, we do have, we also understand that there are some steps that needs to be made, in which we are discussing today, and I thank the council for articulating on that. I also see on publication that there is additional $8 million that was identified as a result of that. That's a statement made by the Secretary of Finance, and that gave rise to the decision to restore the full 80 hours. In addition to that, I think one of the things that we need clarification on, Madam Press and members, is in the Budget Act. Maybe the council can guide us what specific provision embedded in the Budget Act for FY 2025 that authorizes the restoration of 80 hours that in the middle of a fiscal year, if there's such funds that been identified, side and separate from what's being what's in the in the Planning and Budgeting Act of subsection 7604. So if it's okay, Madam President, before we recognize Mr. Dimapan, is there
That would be
anything in
fine.
the budget right now that says that if there's funds available, that we can restore the 80 hours without amending the budget?
There's none in the budget that was passed by the legislature that authorizes that. The
So
budget is the limit. They can't spend more than that. So the additional 10 hours that they have increased, that's way beyond the appropriated budget.
thank you, Council, and Madam President. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jude, and thank you, Council. I now give the floor to our fiscal analyst, Dave Demapan, to be more prescriptive on the values of the restoration of the 80 hours and how it affects the existing passage or the law itself on fiscal 25 budget and subsequent expenditures, if any, of public funds that are beyond the approved ceiling of FY25 budget. Dave, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I should point out first legally the specified section of the Budgeting Act of under Public Law 3-68, Section 201D, which really is the issue here, Madam President, where the restoration of the 80 hours by the governor effective November 3rd. Why? Because we're talking about excess funds, that would have to be included in the budget in order to balance the budget to restore this 80 hours sum of monies that we need for FY 2025. We know the intent that it's good to pay the employees for their livelihood because right now everybody's suffering. But the issue here is this: do we have the financial resources, to balance the budget, to incur this expenditure? Right now, if you look at Public Law 23-26, right, it only spells out that 70 hours per pay period for the employees. And that is the amount appropriated to cover for the expenses for these employees. But for the governor to implement, 80 hours per pay period without identifying the additional resources, we're basically saying that the governor is incurring unauthorized expenditures, that is not included in this Budgeting Act of FY 2025. And so when you look at Section 201D on the Public Law 3-68, it states in this fashion: annual appropriation acts enacted or as amended, shall not appropriate funds in excess of the total Commonwealth financial resources estimated. Okay, and if the estimated amount that is going to be appropriated is not there to meet, the expenditures, then we're not balancing the budget. So in this case, when this implementation of on November 3rd for restoration of the 80 hours, practically the governor is recording unauthorized payroll expenses in the general fund that is not budgeted. So there are three options where you can validate this unbalanced budget. One is if the legislature, approves additional taxation. Two, if the Commonwealth receive additional revenue. Or three, the governor may revise its estimated resources to anticipate the financial resources in excess on this estimated revenue. And therefore, those additional resources will be recognized by this body as a supplemental budget or to amend the House concurrent resolution. That's the option under that specific section of Section 201D of Public Law 3-68. Now, let me go into my analysis as, as requested by the Senate President. We know that during the course of the budget deliberation of FY 2025, the Senate had to took about 6 actions, you know, that that adjusted the executive branch allocation. So we would have to reinstate it back from the amount that it was allocated at 87.5%. Okay, and then also we would also have to reinstate the 12.5% as a whole, the 10 hours that were actually reduced or deducted from the 80 hours on the payroll allocation in FY 2025. So the overall impact based on my analysis is approximately $4.8 million. If we were to reinstate the restoration beginning October 1st, 2024 for FY 2025. And that's my explanation there, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for explaining your analysis. If you could briefly explain on your communication, it says a snapshot of the $14.8 million funding needs by programs. Just for clarification, the $14.8 million, that is the total of the restoration of the payroll hours. Is that correct? Okay, and within your communication on those bullet points, identifying certain values of $500,000 down to the very last bullet of 491,988 independent programs. Could you just clarify those bullet points exactly? What do that particular values, what do they mean with respect to in relation to the $14.8 million?
Then it would then come up to 80 hours, or 100% of the payroll for the employees. So the employees then will be paid per pay period, 80 hours instead of, 70 hours. And that's my explanation there. Same thing if you go down to the legislative branch, we're sharing the $211,182. Again, I had to restore back the 12.5%. That's the impact there, or 10 hours. So that's the impact for legislative branch of $211,182. We need that funding to get these employees paid 80 hours per pay period for the for the entire fiscal year. And the same explanation for the executive branch, which is showing $11.1 million, which is very huge because that's a combination of reinstating back the 87.5%, because at the time during the exercise at the Senate level, PSS would have to be paid a portion out of that 11.1, which received approximately 5.3 million some. And then the other activities that had to be reallocated, like for example, Saipan Mayor, Tinian Municipality, Saipan Solid Waste Management Division, OMB, and also the scholarship for the International Exchange Program. So that's the impact for the executive branch approximately 11.1, including the 12% restoration together. So overall, then would be $11.1 million. Then as you go down the list, you can see from the analysis, Rota municipality total impact approximately $978,000. That again relates to 12.5% restoration or the 10 hours to get them back to 80 hours. And then to Tinian and Aguilan municipality, we're looking at approximately 962,000. That is to restore back the 12.5% or 10 hours to get them back to 80 hours. Then third senatorial district, that's the Saipan Mayor, Northern Ireland Mayor, and the Saipan Municipal Council. We're talking about 400 some $1,000. Warren commissions, 174, and then independent program, $491. That's it, Madam Chair.
Members, you can chime in if you have any comments. If I would just say this off the top of my head right now. So, Dave, if you could just go on record and tell the public for this particular session, what was the approved ceiling of FY 2025?
Approximately $158.6 million.
All right. And what percentage is $14.8 million of that approved ceiling?
So, hold on, Madam Chair.
The only reason why I asked that question is because the statute clearly says that in the case of a $200,000 or 3% or more increase in revenues, that the governor shall transmit within 15 calendar days a special budget message to the legislature.
It's about 9%. 9%, yeah.
Thank you. Comments from the members?
Chair, thank you, Dave, for articulating on the. But do we know, or are you able to tell us which employees are affected? Are these is this something that you can, are you comfortable saying that this analysis that you just put forth is what is being, this is the net effect of what was restored after the budget?
Yes, I think we have to be very specific here about which employees are affected. In some cases, in some activities, some employees are not affected by the austerity because they are matched 100% by, by the federal. Some of them are matched 50%. Some of them are matched, I think, 7.5%, and some of them are matched 20%. So, for example, under the activity of the Homeland Security, some of those employees are funded 20%,
General fund?
20% federal, then 80% general fund. So in that case, the 12.5% is not applicable for this employee because it's 100% funded. You know what I'm saying, no? 80% general fund, 20% federal. So if you add the two of them together, we got 100%. So they are not actually on austerity because they're paid 100% of the time, right? So in all of these activities that are in Schedule A, not all of those employees fall under austerity because some of them are funded by the federal fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's pretty clear, no, very consistent with what the legal counsel was alluding to earlier with regards to the Planning and Budgeting Act, and Dave's articulation on the spreadsheet. I think the next question is: do we have any communication from the administration with whether or not there's a but that would trigger us to even consider an amendment?
Thank you, Senator Hofschneider. And before I entertain that question, that is a good question. And thank you, Dave. I believe that all of us are fully aware that we receive a communication regarding the lifting of the austerity of 10 hours and restoring it back to 80. And it's very clear what the statute calls with respect to anything in excess or less of 200,000, that particular communication must be communicated to the legislature 15 calendar days once those resources have been identified. I think the legal question that I'm gonna put out right now is, has there been anything effectuated before, and now we're talking about it now with respect to a possibility of the governor calling on the legislature to revise the FY25 budget? And where does the body here, in particular the Senate, if we were to entertain such change after the fact, where does that put us legally? And is there any provision, obviously, clearly there could be already a violation of law here under the particular statute, but is there anything also, council, under the Budgeting Act, if such expenditure of public funds beyond the ceiling of what is approved by the legislature with respect to FY 2025, what would be that penalty? And what are the, what are the causes of such should the legislative body act after the fact? In the legal sense, where does that put us?
I think there may be a penalty under the statute for over expenditure of public funds, but I need time to look at it. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, under Section 700 of the Budgeting Act. I'll recognize Senator Cruz while council looks for that.
Thank you, Madam President. Dave, thank you for being here to answer concern and questions regarding you mentioned about not balanced budget if they add additional that is not in the 2025 budget. I want to clarify this. The ARPA that was taken away from the judicial and the LB, is that part of the 2025 allocation appropriation? Because if yes, if it's part of that, then it will not balance if that's taken out from the from the LB. It's no longer the same amount that we passed this last 2025 budget.
Senator, to respond to your inquiry, it's not part of FY 2025 budget because that's ARPA funds, and we're dealing here with the general fund. It's not.
So it's not a part of the 2025.
Right.
And just to clarify whether it's part, because if it's part, then it's also it's not balanced budget if it's part of the.
The only way that it would be part of the FY 2025 budget, if when we look at the resources, the estimated resources that it included, if they include resources from ARPA funds, then in that way we would consider it part of the FY 2025 budget. But when you look at the individual resources of approximately $158.6 million, it doesn't show any funding or any source coming from ARPA funds. And that's my response to you.
Thank you. So can you elaborate the request that I asked you to inquire from Department of Finance in regards to ARPA fund that is submitted to the Senate by former Governor Torres, whether or not, based on their guidelines, the Department of Finance, whether or not that that funding can lapse anytime the governor requested to remove, or there is a provision that the money that was given to each individual here, the Senate has the full expenditure authority other than anybody else that they can take away that ARPA fund. I just wanna hear from you and let the members know what your findings are.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Cruz. I sent an email to the Secretary of Finance requesting for the terms and conditions of the usage of ARPA funds. The fiscal analyst, Tomasa Nahara, emailed me the terms and conditions of the ARPA funds. When I reviewed that agreement, it put certain conditions to the Secretary of Finance as to how the funds of the opera should be used under what types of category. The category includes the funds could be used for small business, small business, household, uh, hospitality industry, such as travel, tour, and also for public emergency health, uh, and also for loss of revenue for the provision of the government services. Those are the categories where the opera funds could be used. Now, under Section 602C of the Social Security Act, specifies also the same usage for the opera funds. Now, if in FY 2022, Public Law, I think 22-08, that's the Budgeting Act of FY 2022, where $175 million of opera funds were appropriated, right, by the legislature, of which approximately $585,000 was allocated to the members' account. And for the Senate side, each would have received about $65,000 each. Now, according to the terms and conditions of that ARPA agreement, the ARPA funds has no fiscal limitation. For example, the funds for FY 2025, I'm sorry, FY 2022 of $585,000 for each member would receive $65,000. The funds, if you don't use it for the entire fiscal year of that 2022, the remaining funds will then carry forward to the next fiscal year. And the expenditure authority for each of those funds under the Senate allocation, to be specific, under this situation, is the member that is going to be receiving that fund. That's the expenditure authority who's authorized to spend and use the funds. No one should be authorized to take the funds away from a member, because under the U.S. Treasury plan, the ARPA funds allocated to the cinema had already been approved by the U.S. Treasury rules and regulation, and any deviation from the spending plan that is approved by the U.S. Treasury, without the Treasury's approval, is a violation, I think, on the federal law. So I'm saying right now that there's no way that your funds should be removed without the authority, expenditure authority, in your case, Santa Cruz, without your approval. And that's my position there, Mr. Senator.
Thank you, Dave. I want to ask the council's opinion on that, no? Whether that's correct, because I remember that there's no fiscal limitation on that, and I'm just wondering why somebody is using my authority to remove that, although it's our opera fund, but it's already appropriated by the legislature. If it's not appropriated by the legislature, I understand it can take that anytime, but we did appropriate that funding and it's part of that budget when we appropriate that, although it's not part of the general fund. And that's why I'm wondering why they're utilizing or they're using that part of the statute, that if it lapses and you don't obligate it, it's taken away. So my case, I did obligate it and it's taken away. I want to ask your opinion now. Is that legal or not?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was only one time that we actually appropriated ARPA funds. It may have been 3 years ago or three fiscal years ago. I was discussing this with Councilor Villagomez, and that was the only time. ARPA funds is under the expenditure authority of the state, the governor, which is the governor. I know the legislature tried to go the route of appropriating those, but it never went through. So if we look at the LB, I think the director was assured that he has operational funds. But after we passed the budget, we ended up with zero operation funds because it was completely ARPA. And that's, to me, I guess it's under the authority and jurisdiction of the governor.
Because I understand, but the first that they gave us, we did appropriate that one because he gave us the upper spending plan and it's included no funding to a member of the legislature.
It
I'm not talking about the one that
It was
he
2024?
backfill. Yeah, I'm talking about the first time that you submitted because some of those funds are not being used yet and still there,
yeah,
but
but
it's already been
even
appropriated.
for 2024, I don't remember. And Dave can correct me that we appropriated ARPA funds for 2024. No.
Senator, if I may.
Okay, well, but we'll continue to
Point of clarification,
to inquire.
I think maybe council and the fiscal analyst can look at that. I forget which fiscal year it was, but that was where we had the three schedules: the A plus B equals C. If I'm not mistaken, he might have vetoed the portion where he has to follow Schedule B, which is ARPA. But maybe that's something that you guys can look into to see if that was set in stone through the Budget Act, or if the governor at the time vetoed that portion. Because had we left it as it was, we would have had that ARPA portion that would have stayed with each member, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me clarify. I can respond back to you, Senator Manglonian, that you look at the FY 2022 Budgeting Act, which is Public Law 22-08. There were some provisions there that were dismissed or vetoed by the governor, and that's one of the sections there that you're talking about. I think it's on section 700 and 800. And the governor vetoed that because it doesn't want anybody to reallocate opera funds, because the opera funds had already been, the spending plan of the opera funds had already been approved by the U.S. Treasury. So that would jeopardize the agreement with the U.S. Treasury. And that was the reason for vetoing that section of the opera funds. But the expenditure authority for the funds allocated to the members were still there. And so that each member who's allocated of approximately, 65,000 each is responsible for the expenditures and usage of the opera funds. And then, Councilor Bermudez, I also would like to correct my statement that also in FY 2023, there was also an ARPA appropriation of approximately 32 million. Then it was revised down to about 16 million. Remember that now. I just remember that. So there were only two fiscal years that opera funds were appropriated by the legislature, 2022 and 2023. Thank you.
But I don't think it was so much an appropriation. I think I'm not sure if it's within the veto message where they kind of consider it as for informational purposes only, as opposed to an actual an appropriation. And so I think that's something we'll have to look into again.
Thank you, members. Before I recognize Senator Jude, just to, since we're talking about some legality here, Council, perhaps maybe this is a question. So if I'm not mistaken, the appropriation on ARPA, I believe, happened on FY22 budget. And so considering that ARPA funds are supposed to be obligated up to this year, end of this year, December 31st, 2024, and must be spent fully spent by December 31st, 2026. My legal question on that particular concern that Senator Cruz is raising with the appropriations to Senate members and how their ARPA funding are being swept away and not being given back to them to spend or even obligate up to the end of December of this year and then spend it all in December of 2026. Does that particular time period, that's my question, apply to FY22 appropriation of those funds to the senators in question right now? I now recognize Senator Jude Schneider.
Thank you, Madam President. And I think if respectfully asked that we get a detailed explanation, no, as far as the question being posed by the senators, primarily about the authority of the ARPA for the legislature, for that matter. A good written legal opinion from the legal counsel would be very helpful, because this is a very important discussion being raised by a members for that matter. In addition to, it's troubling that we're talking about this, and in fact, one of the first branch of government is crippled in operations because of this exercise that was unilaterally made in the, I'm referring to what transpired with the AOB. And then the generosity of a senatorial district appropriated the local funds to help. But once you appropriate a local funds and you put in a CNMI branch of government, it becomes a general fund. Unless speaking out of terms here, Council, I kind of anticipated this when I saw that there's going to be an issue. Because now some delegation members have businesses in the respective delegation islands, but we were given advice that it's not permissible, although it's there. We're not asking to go to Florida or Nebraska for a legislative conference. We're performing our duties as a delegation to entertain a important piece of legislation. So this is the reason why it's important that in the midst of all these things, it's important that we discuss the FY 2025 budget, and really, if there's enough money to restore 80 hours, at least restore the 200,000 that you took from the LB, so that the delegation doesn't have to appropriate local funds to a CNMI branch of government. So this is a bad precedent, Madam Press, to have a local delegation appropriate for and I hope that it doesn't happen again in the next coming budget cycle, because now I was tasked by the chairman of the delegation to do a hearing. Now I have to reconsider if I'm going to still do it, because the staff that being requested to assist or I guess cannot travel. I wish we can drive to Tinian, so we don't need to request for travel. So we need to look at the issue from a bird's eye view, no? That once you appropriate a funds that was approved by the governor into a CNMI legislative CNMI branch, and it becomes the property of the branch. And there's senatorial districts that have businesses to do in their respective, same as the Saipan delegation when they do their hearing here. It's the same concept. But unfortunately, we have to fly, and we need to be afforded that same service. So this is the reason why it's important that we discuss this FY 2025 budget and really, however it is that we're gonna do moving forward. I'm interested to see what kind of package is gonna be remitted here come the next legislature, because I don't know if we're gonna have the time to attend to it now. But I don't want to speak out of term, Madam President. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Hofschneider. And I'll close with my comments. Thank you for mentioning about the delegation providing funding for the legislative branch, in particular the Bureau. Just recently, we had that SNILE session, and we did appropriate the funds, and it has been signed into law. And that is a huge concern, knowing that right now we are at this juncture where there is a possibility of a revised budget coming over to the legislature for FY25, again, after the fact. The economy is sinking, or it has already sunk. We've been reading the papers and a lot of conflicting statements. Hotel occupancy is very low, below 30% in most hotels, probably all of them. And you have the tourist arrivals are not just there. Even if there's additional flights coming in, it's just insufficient to hold the economy up for us to be at that pre-pandemic level. And to backtrack on this particular legislation that's now just recently passed, this is not just about a debit and credit entry of the CNMI government's financial system, where we can wash numbers in and out, plus or minus, and cover whatever has happened after the fact. I want to place emphasis on we are the body that legislate laws, and we have statutes to follow. And we should not be pick and choosing what is a violation of law when we have every citizen out there that is looking at us right now, that if they make any infractions, that they slam the books on them. But as elected officials, we should all hold ourselves accountable as well, and to be at a higher level of standard of law, rather than just trying to brush it off and clean the books, because now we realize that provisions of law has been violated. I think we need to own up to that, and we need to recognize what are we really here for, not just a separation of branch of government and just to pick and choose again of what do we place violations on and what we don't. It's not fair to the people when they're all being held accountable to every law on the books. If there's no any other further comments from the members, this is a great discussion regarding this particular issue, and I'm sure this is not the end of it either. Recognize Senator Corina Magofnia.
Thank you, Madam President. So, with some of the senators asking more specific questions specifically to ARPA funds, my concern and line of questions are geared more towards the general concept of the processes and protocols in place, right, pertaining to potential violations of the law. And so thank you, Council Bermudez, for explaining and providing clarification on the Budget Act and specifically Title I, subsection 7604, item B. And to Mr. Dimapon, our fiscal analyst, thank you also for providing us a snapshot of what it would cost the government to restore the additional 10 hours that was not approved in the FY 2025 budget. So before we even jump into conclusion, right, I guess I would like to verify with the Senate clerk or any members for that matter here at the legislature whether or not the governor or the administration has transmitted any form of communication or message to the legislature regarding the identification of the resources to be able to restore and lift the austerity. No. Okay. So to our knowledge, right, we didn't receive any communication from the governor that is required and mandated of him in order to proceed with um, lifting the austerity. So based on the information that we have with uh, us today, and based on the explanation provided by the council, I guess, I mean, to me, it's clear that there was a violation of the Budget Act, specifically uh, subsection 7604, item B. But just to be on the record, I would like to ask our legal counsel to confirm that there is indeed a violation.
think there may be an exception because 2025 budget is what we appropriated was general fund.
Okay.
If somehow the 10%, I don't know whether they're using ARPA funds to restore that.
I mean, at this point, it
10
shouldn't even
hours?
matter whether it's ARPA funds, right? It's clear in the definition that it's 200,000 or 3%. And obviously, based on the analysis that was done by our fiscal analyst at 14.8 million or 9%, clearly is above the 3%. So,
But point
Oh.
of clarification, it's 3% of local revenues and not outside revenues.
okay.
So this
I
is,
mean-
I think this is where council was saying it would, the exception would be if it was
Would be if
outside
it-
source,
Okay.
then there's
And
no.
because we are lacking information, right? With regards to the source of funds, it's kind of hard for us to even determine, how to move forward. But for argument's sake, right, hypothetically, if these were not ARPA funds or federal funds, FEMA reimbursements, and strictly sources that were identified, somehow were identified, um, and if there was a violation, what are the consequences and what are the recommended course of action that this body would have to do to ensure that
Under Title 1, 7701, there's criminal offenses, and it talks about no officer or employee of the county shall willfully, knowingly to make authorized expenditure from or create authorize any obligation or allotment made under any appropriation or fund in excess of the amount available therein. So we're strictly talking about general fund money, and they're using additional general fund money to fund those 10 hours, then clearly it's a violation of the law, and the penalty is every person who willfully, knowingly violates that section is guilty of a crime, and upon conviction thereof shall be fined not more than $2,000 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both.
Okay. So thank you for that, Council. And I think in today's article on the newspaper, I believe there was an article by NVA stating that they are seeing the number of arrivals increasing in FY 2025. It's not really clear as to what those numbers are and what values they represent. But if that is something that finance has identified along with NVA, I think that's something that should be shared with the legislature too, so that we understand what those values are and whether or not it also exceeds the 3% or $200,000 threshold, right? And so this is just to put it out there and clarify for the public that whenever we have things like this that come up, there are steps to take, and you can't just unilaterally make decisions to. I mean, not, again, going back to Senator Jude, right? It's not that we are against the lifting of austerity. We're very, very happy and in support of the governor giving back the 10 hours to our government employees, but there are steps and protocols to be followed, and there should be no exceptions. So that's all the comments that I have, Senate President. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I recognize Senator Donna Maloney, just back to the local revenues. Clearly, the statute here under Title 1, Section 7604 does not state local revenues at all. It just generally speaks revenues. And my understanding of the ARPA money, when the pandemic hit, that particular money that was given down to every state under the United States, including the CNMI U.S. territories, are considered local funds. And the way I see it, how it's defined, is that ARPA money is considered local revenue. And that's the reason why the federal government gave us that money to subsidize our government, because we lost the economy when the pandemic hit. And so that's something that council, you might have to go back and check how the ARPA monies, how is the U.S. Treasury defining the ARPA money? And I doubt that they're classifying that as a strict federal money, category, but it's considered local funds to be used by the local state government that they have allocated the monies to. I now recognize Senator Donna Maloney.
Thank you, Madam President. But I think also in what you just mentioned, this was the issue we had, or the challenge we had in the prior legislature to appropriate outside source, albeit whether it's considered local money or not, which is why we never really appropriated ARPA from the beginning, because that legislation didn't go through both houses. But I want to share with the members that just to consider that as part of the budget deliberations last fiscal year for fiscal year 2025, we understood that from the get-go there was a shortfall of about 7 million, with the understanding that there was monies set aside to cover that, particularly the law enforcement. Dave, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but because of that 5 million that was transferred over to PSS, that further cut law enforcement down to, I think, somewhere in the 20% funded through local monies, with the understanding that the outside sources will cover and bring them up to 80 or 87.5%. And so I think the question is, what would, aside from that, whatever 7 million was identified, the additional monies would be the numbers in question as to where those additional monies come from, which weren't discussed during our budget hearings and which weren't identified at the time. But at least for the sake of what we've discussed during our budget hearings, that 7 or maybe close to 8 million was already an understanding that these were monies that were set aside and saved for to cover for all these employees' salaries that was affected by that 5 million transferred over to PSS. And so we haven't had any discussions about it. I know that we were probably we were pressured to pass the construction tax bill, which would provide for additional revenues, which could have addressed the additional funds that we took to give the senatorial districts. But that was vetoed. And according to the Secretary of Finance, at the time it was vetoed, she was unaware of the reasons behind it, which is also a concern, and which is why we haven't addressed the new legislation by the Speaker in regards to the construction tax bill, simply because the committee has not received any justification as to the original veto and the concerns that were shared from that, as well as the what the fiscal impact would be with the new legislation. And so that's just something I wanted to share out. But in discussing with council, if in fact these are all outside source, and I don't think the governor would be in violation. But then again, if he's not in violation, why would there be a need to amend the budget? And so that's a question that we can bring up to the administration to determine where the difference is between the 4.8 to what the the Fiscal Affairs Committee had decided at the time of allowing up to 7 or 8 million in over expenditures. Where did that monies come from? And so I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Manglonia. Recognize Senator Jude Hoff-Schneider.
Just for clarification, we're still in committee of the whole. Or okay. Anyway, okay. Thank you, Madam President. I just want to, since we're in the agenda of discussing about the funding source and all, just wanted to also disclose that during one of our deliberation for the budget, just to remind everyone that we actually had a meeting with the Secretary of Finance and some of her team with regards to the uptick on the increase in excise tax coming from the second senatorial district at the time, before I believe it was 6 weeks prior to the passage of the budget. And I recall that there was a reduction in budget authority of about like less than 5% or 2% because of the issue with collection. So as what was indicated earlier, whether or not that is registered as a reserve account or new revenue to catapult the decision to restore the 80 hours prior to prior to us entertaining any revised budget. Those information we need to know. And as what was mentioned by the chair, Senator Donald, it was an understanding that the estimated revenue it's going to generate with the construction tax would assist with the FY 2025 budget without really articulating on a fiscal analyst or a financial analysis as to how is it going to help. And then less than a month or less than 2 weeks after it passing, it was vetoed. So that's kind of like it throws us in a very confusing state where we really need to know how we're going to craft this out. And I also want to point out, Madam Chair, that all of us here in the legislature, we supported the EVS TAP for extra layer of clearance from visitors coming primarily from the People's Republic of China, because that seems to be the issue with now the administration pivoting away from China. And my disappointment is there's really no indication as to whether or not how's that working out for us here, because I believe October 1st was the effective date of that implementation here. I have my own information which indicates that it is working, but we need to hear from our visiting authority how's that coming along, because it's their statistics that they just shared publicly in November 2024, from visitors from Japan, registered at 479 in November 2024 compared to 545 visitors in November 2023, which is about 12% decrease. And then in China, from November 2020, it reached 800 compared to 244 in November 2023, an increase in 228%. Although it's far below what we've anticipated pre-pandemic, but if the issue is the wrong kind of tourists we're getting from PRC, then I trust the AVS TAP. I trust it, or AVS TAP, the mechanism whereby it really weeds out the people that are coming in. So I encourage the MBA administration to focus on this particular matter and revisit the pivoting away from China, because even in the state of Hawaii, everywhere they were welcoming Chinese from tourists from China, and I just don't understand that we're like what you said, Madam President. We're what did you say earlier? That but we're still here trying to wish that there's going to be a rebound in other destination, when in fact, I really appreciate the South Korea, but it's saturated. Guam is, it's the same. We have the same target market, so it'd be interesting to again see the analysis coming forward in the next few months. But I cannot help but to encourage the administration and Marianas Visitors Authority to really work and market the CNMI to the Chinese market, so we can help our economy here, our tourism economy, that it's been frustrated over the last several years, or 2 to 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hofschneider. Any other comments from the members? Senators online, any comments? None? Okay, we shall rise back to our plenary session. Thank you, senators, for the discussion on, again, the concerns that we're having regarding the 14 point some million dollars that needs to be addressed, and to refund back those particular funding categories that were defunded for the passage of FY25, if that so be the case, if ever that particular revised budget shall reach the legislature. Moving on to item R under our agenda this afternoon, announcements. Any announcements from the senators? None? Our last item, item S. I now recognize the floor leader for the proper adjournment.
Thank you, Madam President. I now offer a motion to adjourn this session subject to the call of the president.
Again.
There's a motion to adjourn this session this afternoon, has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Nays, this Senate session is hereby adjourned. Thank you, senators.